So guys, in this video, I'm going to be doing a video on basic programming for calisthenics and weightlifting. I want this to be a video that covers all the information you could possibly need, whether you're a beginner to a little bit more intermediate, on how you can create your own program. There's not going to be very many channels, specifically calisthenics channels, that are going to be going into this much detail or even making this video, because for a lot of those other channels, they are selling you a program. So the purpose of this video is to give you all the information you could possibly need to create your own program that's effective so you can reach your goals, but it doesn't cost you a penny. The only thing I ask is if you could like the video so other people can see it, subscribe so you see more of my content, and most importantly, if you have a question, there are no stupid questions, and there's probably someone else like you that also has the same question. Comment down below, because there could be something that I'm going to, or probably quite likely going to miss, because I'm trying to get as much information in a short amount of time. There might be something I missed or something I could go into a little bit more detail. So if you have any questions, please comment down below and I'll do my best to answer that as fully as I possibly can. And if you have any information that you would like to add that you think would complement this very nicely, comment that down below as well, because I want this video to cover everything someone could possibly need when it comes to basic programming. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. So let's jump straight into the video. So as you can see, I've numbered this board so we can go through a nice even progress so you guys can follow along, and there will be a lot of information in this video, so you might have to rewind or maybe write it down, might be a benefit, but we're going to go through this step by step. It also allows me to try and be a little bit more concise. So the first thing we're going to be looking at when it comes to programming or creating a program is we need to think about what is inspiring us to do it. How are we going to do it? Because we need to channel ourselves in the right way. There are a couple of things that can go towards that, but two of the most important things is going to be our goal. What our goal is going to define which path we go down. Someone who is a runner, someone who is a powerlifter, someone that's focused on strength or hypertrophy or general fitness and well-being, their program is going to be a little bit different. Equipment is probably going to be the next important thing, because there's no point programming to do a squat or a deadlift if you only have access to a barbell once or twice a month. Or if you want to be able to do pull-ups, but you being able to work out is dependent on the weather or certain circumstances like this. We want to know what you've got access to, because we need to put in exercises that you can consistently do. There's other things like experience, what your skill level is, what you've been doing maybe before or after, that's going to sort of factor into it. And also our time, like how often can you work out? How much time can you allocate to working out? 20 minutes here, half an hour to an hour, 2 or 3 times a week. This is going to dictate our program as well, but the two most important things is going to be goals and equipment. So the second stage we're going to be looking at, and I'm going to be going through a template with you through this thing. So after gaining all of this information, at the end of this video, you're going to come away with a workout that you can go along with, and I'm going to teach you how you can progress it as well. So at least at the end of this, you have general information, but you will come away with a workout as well. So the template we're going to be looking at is a full body one. We're looking at a full body. I'm going to go through a few reasons why you should focus on full body, and sort of full body isn't just for beginners. I'm doing full body at the minute, and it's something that I think is a great foundation. But the reason why I'm going to be talking about it from this standpoint is the great thing about full body is there's more frequency. The more often we do something, the better we're going to get. So we have more frequency, we get to learn things faster. If you want to learn the push-up, the row, the pull-up, whatever it is, the more often we do something, the better we're going to get with it. And the other great thing as well, it's a great way of increasing our volume, and volume is a key driver for hypertrophy. The other next thing is more recovery. This is something that people often neglect when it comes to their training. More people are focused on stimulus than recovery. And this is again a big problem when it comes to body part splits, which is what people tend to focus on when they first start out, is a body part split. And that tends to lead to less recovery. And recovery is where we grow. Recovery is where we compensate, get bigger, and get stronger. So if you're doing a 5-day split, you might think of it and think, well, I'm only training my chest or back once a week. The thing is, you may have local stress, but you also have systemic stress. So those 5 workouts over several weeks can build up to overall fatigue. And that's something we want to limit when we want to progress. And the other thing is, some days people will have a separate day for shoulders and biceps, and those two are going to be worked whenever you do chest and back. So in some cases, the frequency of those muscles or how much volume those small kind of muscles end up taking can impact the rest of your training. Or at least if we have full body, we can get in more recovery and we can balance out that overall volume or overall exercises. And the next thing is, it's easier to fit in. So not everyone can do 5 days a week, where if we do full body, we might be able to get away with just 2 days a week. On some cases, if we're able to, maybe 3, depending on how well you deal with stress and how well you deal with the recovery of that. That can depend on person to person, but it's easier to fit into people's lifestyle, and that's what we want. We want to be able to create something that people are going to be able to be consistent with. The problem with a 5-day split as well is if you miss a day for whatever reason, you then start to build in imbalance within the program, where if you do a full body, you know your legs, your back, your chest are going to be hit evenly. So we want to be able to find a way in which we can create that balance between stimulus and recovery, and also take into local and systemic fatigue. So full body is going to be the place that we're going to start. So moving on to the next step is, how do we create a program towards our goal? Typically when people are getting into calisthenics or weightlifting, the general goal is, I want to build muscle and I want to get stronger. So how do we go about that? So when it comes to creating our program, key thing is going to be, what exercises are we going to be choosing? The key thing when we do this is we need to be able to create balance, not from an aesthetic standpoint, but also how our body functions, how it moves, how we're going to use it in everyday life. There's no point having 2 pushing exercises, 1 back and 1 legs that isn't really stretching, because we're going to create imbalances when it comes to our upper body, and then we're going to have that kind of weak legs to upper body ratio. So we need to be able to create balance. So when we have a program, we have to have a look down option and go, okay, have we got balance? Have we got a good amount of volume or exercises that's evenly distributed throughout the body? We need to be able to create balance. The next thing is experience and strength level. What area are we coming in from? Are we coming in from somewhere where we have a fairly good base level of strength, we are able to do pull-ups, or we can't even do a pull-up and we're gonna have to move towards an inverted row? We need to know what our current skill level and experience is within the exercise that we're going to choose, because we need to know what we can do and factor that in. If you're barely able to do 1 or 2 pull-ups, there's no point factoring it in as it is itself into your program, because you're just not going to progress with it. We have to find a progression or regression that works within your current skill and strength level. And the best way to do that is maybe have a day where you test your strength in a number of different exercises. Write it down and say, I can do this many pull-ups, this many dips, inverted rows, push-ups, so forth. Whatever exercises you plan to add into your program, let's have a look at what your current skill or experience level within that exercise is. The next obviously thing that we brought about in point 1 is equipment. What equipment do you have access to, especially from a regular standpoint? How often can you have access to a pull-up bar, to rings, to dips, to just floor space for push-ups and things? We need to incorporate things that you can have access to. If you're going to be incorporating a barbell back squat and you borrowing it and you're using it in a friend's garage, but you can only use it every once or twice a month, if you're going to be adding it in, we need to factor in another exercise to fill in that gap where you're not going to be doing that squat. We need to factor that in. What equipment do you have access to? The next thing we're going to be looking at when it comes to creating a program is our work day and our rest day balance. We need to work out the right balance between our stimulus and our recovery. And this is going to change from person to person. How many work days can we get in and progress with, and how many days of recovery do we need to where we get that right balance? We don't want to be working out 3 days a week, and when we come back to our next workout, we're still fatigued and we're struggling to hit numbers. Do we need to take away a work day and add in an extra rest day? Do we need to have more rest days in between each work day so we can maximize, so we come into the next workout, we're fully recovered and we can progress? We need to work out that balance. A common one for say a full body might be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. However, if you're finding that you're struggling with that, you might have to move to a Monday, Thursday, and then maybe come in on a Sunday to another Monday. We need to work up that, where you might have 2 sessions one week and 3 the next. Find that balance that works right for you. Also, as well, when we first start out, our work capacity might not be great. So we want to find that capacity or that amount of work that we can do just to stimulate growth, and then we recover from. Because when we first start out, the amount of work that we can do in a given session is going to be a lot less than someone who's more intermediate. How much work we need to be able to put in and we can recover from, that's something that we will learn the more we go through. And finally, what intensity and rep range are we going to be working in? Typically, if you're more focused on strength, you would work at a higher intensity, lower rep range. And if you're more focused on, say, hypertrophy, and you don't really care about strength, you just want to get bigger, you can do that with a high intensity, low rep, but it's far easier to do that with lower intensity, higher rep, because volume is a key driver for hypertrophy. So it's far easier to get more volume in doing sets of 12 than sets of 5. So that's something we want to be looking at. If you're looking at it from a complete and utter beginner, if you want to still focus on strength, you'd still be better working on the maybe 3 sets of 10 or up to 12 reps. Even though that's not the intensity range for strength, what you'll find as a beginner is that you want to be doing more reps, because the more reps you do, the faster you're going to learn and the easier you're going to learn an exercise. If you have an exercise that you're fairly new and you have too high an intensity, you're more likely to ingrain poor movement patterns and you're more likely to get injured. We want a lower intensity so we can learn the movement, ingrain the form, but get enough volume in so we can learn the movement. You'll find when you initially start training, you will increase in strength quite quickly, because it's the working of your central nervous system and the muscles and then getting in synchronization. The strength will come initially just from doing the exercise itself. So actually more reps is actually going to be better when you first start, because you will still gain strength from the learning of the movement. So something like 3 sets of 10 is going to be a great place to start for you. So moving on to the next point, the workout template that I'm going to be giving you is, and this is going to be broken down in a few different ways. So first of all, if you're a complete and utter beginner, an inverted row, a push-up, and a squat/lunge, okay? So if we look at this program, does it create balance? Yes. A push, pull, legs. Experience level, if you're weak and you're struggling, you're not gonna be able to do a pull-up, an inverted row is a great exercise, because with the inverted row, we can change the angle of our body to find an angle that works for you. Even if you're relatively weak, you can always do a 45-degree angle inverted row. We'll find a way in which you can find a way to change the angle of your body to find it so you can work it just for you. It's a great thing about the inverted row. And the push-up is exactly the same. Change the angle of your body to find a progression that allows you to work within that rep range, and then you adjust it as you get stronger. And most people are going to be capable of doing sets of 10 with the bodyweight squat, and this is why the lunge is a great way to add in here. So this creates balance and it works within our skill and our strength level. If you are someone who is a little bit stronger and you have a better experience or strength level, you might be able to do the same principle of a pull-up, a dip, and a step up. There's balance here. We've got a push, pull, legs, and these are more harder variations. All of these are compound exercises that are going to be working multiple muscles over multiple joints, so we don't need to worry about isolation here, especially if you're a beginner. With the pull-up section, if you are stronger, you can deal with the 8 to 12 rep range, but if you really are focused on strength, if you're someone that's able to crack out a lot of pull-ups and a lot of dips, you've probably got a good base level of strength. So you could, if you wanted to focus on strength, something like a 3 sets of 5 to 8 is a great place to start. Normally with this one, you could possibly do it 2 to 3 times a week with 3 minutes rest in between. I know that's longer than what most people are used to, but remember, the way in which we progress, we get bigger and stronger, is how we perform. We don't just need to build up that fatigue and burn the muscles out. It's how we perform, and having slightly longer rest period allows you to perform better. You will progress faster that way. You can also do them singly, so just inverted row, inverted row, inverted row, then move on to the push-ups, or you can do inverted row, push-up, straight into a squat, and kind of do them as a giant set, and that can help with time, so you get more done in less time. It's also good for getting up your heart rate, and it makes you feel a little bit more athletic. It's a good way to add that in. You can do that all together. If you wanted to, you could add these exercises in together to create one program. That's something that I'm doing now, give or take the dip for the handstand push-up and the squat and lunge for, say, hyper extensions. It's pretty much what I'm doing at the moment. You could add these in, but this is something I'm going to talk about in the next point. And basically where you go from here is we're going to move on to step 5, which is, if this was your template, how do you progress it? And this is the part where people most struggle with. It's easy to find this workout template, but where do you progress with it? So moving on to step 5, how do we progress? So typically when we look at this in this sort of stage, we might be looking at linear progression. How do we do that? Progressive overload. This is what we're looking at. Progressively making things harder, so we challenge our muscles, adapt to it, and improve. Okay, so a typical way, especially with calisthenics, is adding volume. Okay, people will tend to, when they get to a certain point, when they've hit a certain rep count, they will add a rep, and they'll keep adding a rep, and they'll do that so forth. But you don't just have to add reps, you can also add sets. So if you hit a certain rep number, and instead of keep on going, you can reset to the original one and maybe add in another set, and that's a great way of adding in overall volume. So for instance, if you were doing 3 sets of 8 to 12, and sometimes I think 8 to 12 is better than doing 3 sets of 10, because when you keep hitting 3 sets of 10, you don't know when to progress. Where if you pick a progression where you're doing 3 sets of 8, once you are able to do sets of 12, you can already see the progress you've made. So when it comes to the volume, you can continue to keep going up to maybe 15 or 20 if you wanted to. But if you're like, well, no, I don't want to do more than 12, you could just reset it back to 8 and do 4 sets. Yes, you've come down, you're doing less volume initially, but when you go back up to 12, you're now doing more overall volume, and you can continue that up to even 5 sets. And that volume then comes into it, and that's a way of increasing it so you can keep progressing. It's one way to do it. The next way is to increase weight or intensity. If you're using weights, maybe you're doing calisthenics, but you have some dumbbells at home, you would progressively add weight each time. That's where you can make it more intense. So your muscles have to work harder, and that stimulates growth. If you are doing calisthenics, it might just be moving to a harder progression. So if you're doing inverted rows, for instance, as a beginner, and you're at a 45-degree angle, moving closer towards that 90-degree angle is going to make it harder because your legs are taking less of the load, and to complete the movement, your back muscles are having to work harder. That's where the progression on moving to a harder progression is harder. We're going from bar dips to ring dips, or chin up to the block. Different variations like this, we make the muscles have to work harder to complete the movement. That's how we can move to that with that. The next one is playing with tempo. So if you're doing push-ups and it normally takes you 3 seconds to do a rep, increasing the tempo, so maybe it takes you longer to do it to maybe 5 seconds, is going to make it harder because now your muscles are under a longer time under tension. This can challenge you and make it more intense and make it harder to hit a particular rep count. If you're doing sets of 12 and you're taking 3 seconds, I guarantee if you go to 5 or 6 seconds per rep, your rep number will dramatically drop down. So we can play around with tempo. The next is adjust our rest times. If you're used to taking 3 minutes rest in between, say a giant set or single sets, suddenly you drop it to 2.5 to 2 minutes, that build up of fatigue is going to be harder to hit those same numbers, and your body has to work with less energy reserves, it has to work more efficiently, and it tests the muscle more because you've got more build up fatigue. So playing around with your rest times is a way in which we can do that too. The next one is frequency. If you're working out 2 times a week doing this, and suddenly you go, right, I've got to a point where I feel like I'm progressing well, I'm going to add in another workout a week, your overall weekly volume is going to increase. The more work that you're doing and more often testing your muscles is going to lead to progression there as well. The next thing is obviously adding in exercises. So this is something I want to talk about because what kind of inspired this post was someone asking about programming and how we can incorporate that into adding exercises. So it's something I want to talk about in the next point, but you can add in exercises. So for instance, if you were doing this workout here and you decided, you know what, I want to combine and add these exercises in, you're doing more work. You're double the amount of volume you're doing and you're working your muscles in different movements. One final thing that I want to point out here is on how to progress is going to failure. Going to failure can be one way in which you can test yourself to push yourself a little bit harder. My advice is to not go to failure every single set, every single workout. If you want to, you can, and it can sort of help you to progress, but I think you're more likely to do overall less volume and you're more likely to hit a plateau. If you're insistent on wanting to go to failure, then my advice is to do it on your last set of each exercise. So at least you can push yourself, you might squeeze out an extra few reps, but the sets after that aren't going to be affected because you're moving to a different muscle group. So that's one point when it comes to going to failure. But when we move on to more advanced or intermediate people, they might be thinking, how do we progress? Here, instead of linear progression, we're moving to sort of a periodization where we're a planned manipulation of training variables. And this is going to be a lot harder to manipulate, and we have to be more careful because what we have to do is as we get more advanced, managing our recovery and our stimulus becomes a lot harder. With linear progression, we just keep adding on bit by bit, but we cannot do that indefinitely. We can't just keep adding weight, moving to harder progressions, or keep adding volume. Eventually, we're going to hit a point where we can't continue anymore. And we need to switch it up. We need to move things, and we need to start managing things. We have to be more careful with how we manage things. And this is why with this program, we have to be very important. So whenever you're doing this, making a log and writing down what you're doing is very important because we need to see what's working and what's not. We need a trackable history of where you're going, what you're adding, what you're taking away, and how we progress. And this is why I think it's very important where we start with more of a minimalist style, where if you're doing one where you're doing lots of different exercises straight away from the get-go, thinking you need to cover every base, a pull-up, a row, lots of different variations of back exercises to lots of accessory work, it doesn't leave you a lot of room to progress. Where at least if you start from a basic, foundational, 1 exercise per body part, maybe even to 2, when it comes to progression, you can always add and remove exercises, where if you're doing all of them in one go, it makes it harder to know what's working and what's not, and what to take away and what to add. So here, we need to be more mindful of the stimulus for us to progress. And this becomes a lot harder. So we have to start incorporating different tricks, let's say, to be able to allow us to keep going. And obviously there is going to be a natural ceiling of how far we can go with our muscle building and our strength. However, we can manipulate things once we hit a plateau with linear progression. How do we keep progressing? Because we can't just keep adding indefinitely in volume, intensity. We have to start changing those things. And there's a few different ways in which we can do that. So one of the ways is changing our intensity and volume on a daily or weekly basis. So with this, we might just be doing a straight workout every single time. As we progress and try ringing out linear progression, adding volume or reps or adding weight, we might be able to do every week. Then it might get to a stage where we do it every 2 weeks. Then we might get to a stage where we're only going to be able to progress and add a rep or add weight maybe once a month. And as you get more advanced, that's some cases where it might get to, because you need more of a stimulus to be able to keep growing, but there's only so much work you can take. And then the amount of work that you're doing takes its toll on your recovery, and we need to manage those balances. So when we look at what some people will look at as undulating periodization, is we change it from a daily to a weekly. So if we're doing it, for instance, you could be doing an upper body, lower body split. You might have one session, might be high intensity or high volume, and the second workout might be low volume or low intensity, because now we're playing with our intensity and volume levels, because we can't just keep going hard all the time. We need to sort of, in a way, create a wave to be able to grow, to recover, to grow and recover. We can't just keep hitting the body hard. So we can do that on a daily basis, or we can move to a weekly where we have a week of maybe high intensity or high volume, and the second week it's lower intensity, lower volume. And we change the phases because we need to be able to progress, but we also need to allow our body to be able to compensate from that. Next thing we can do is add and remove exercises. So this is one of the key questions that was in the post about this, which was, how do we add and remove exercises? What do we do? And my thing is, it always comes down to how it impacts your performance. And the reason being behind adding and removing exercises, if you have a body part that is missing. So for instance, if you're looking here and you're finding like, I'm getting no direct lower back work, no direct core work, and no maybe calf work. If you want to add in an exercise to be able to fit those gaps, then fine. That's good. Add it in. If you find that gaps are coming up, let's say you're working out these muscles and you're finding that certain muscles are lagging behind because they're not really being adequately hit, then adding in that would be great. If you want to add in maybe some rotator cuff work because you're finding that you don't want to get injuries, you want to strengthen up those to reduce the risk of injuries, to actually increase your performance of them, adding in a rotator cuff work or certain exercises like that, some accessory like that to help with injury prevention, then that's a great thing to add. If you just want to start adding in exercises just for the sake of it, that's going to where you have problems. And the other thing is we need to judge when we add an exercise about removing it too. So let's say, for instance, what's quite common is people will be doing this exercise and they go, well, I want to get some more direct arm work because they want bigger arms. Or they find that maybe their biceps are lagging behind when it comes to their rows and their pull-ups. Your biceps will be getting adequately hit with the row and the pull-up. All that tension, that lifting is going through your biceps. But let's say maybe you find that the bicep is the weak link. Add in some direct bicep work can be really beneficial to improve it, so that it improves your overall performance within these exercises. And if you can improve your overall performance in these exercises, you'll get overall bigger and stronger. The question is, and what the problem that happens is people will add in the bicep work and they'll keep it there indefinitely. And this is where it can be a bit of a problem, because you may come to another plateau again and you can't just add more bicep work. And then you start adding in the problem of your biceps get hit in the row and the pull-up, and now you're doing extra work. Is that extra bicep work, is that going to impact the performance of these? Because now you're increasing the overall volume and frequency on such a tiny muscle. Is it going to be able to recover in time to be able to come for your next workout? Is it going to impact the performance? Because that's what we have to do when we're looking at adding and removing exercises. How does it affect our performance? So you could add in the bicep, and then you find that the stronger, bigger biceps help you with your pull-ups and rows. Once you've made that step, I would recommend taking it away. When you take it away, does your performance keep up that new level, or does it decline? If it declines, then keep it in. If it stays at that current level, great. Because now you've added in stronger biceps, it's now gonna work again. Eventually you may hit a plateau again, and then you might go, okay then, maybe it's the biceps again. I'll add in the bicep curls again and see, does it improve my performance within these exercises? If it doesn't, it may not be the fact that your biceps are weaker. Maybe it might be that your lats are now struggling. You need stronger lats, or maybe your rhomboid. So now you can think, okay, maybe I'll add in some direct lat work, test, see if it improves. It may not be that. It might be that I need to work on my rhomboid. So maybe some extra rowing or maybe some scapular pull-ups could be really beneficial here. Add it in, test. Does it improve your overall thing? If it doesn't, it builds you back up. Use it until it comes in and it builds up your overall performance. Take it away, test to see if you fall behind without having it in. If it doesn't, take it away. If it does, keep it in. You want to be adding and removing exercises and using them properly as tools, because if you don't and you just keep adding an exercise and go, oh, I think my triceps are lagging behind now, I'm going to add in triceps. Before you know it, from your core basic exercises, you've added in a load of extra isolation work, which could in itself build in some imbalances, but now your workup's getting longer. Those extra sets on those muscles may impact your performance on your big compound exercises. And before you know it, your 3 to 6 exercise workout is now turned into 9 to 12. and then your overall recovery is going to be harder, your sessions are longer, and it could impact your overall thing. And now you don't know, when you've added all these exercises, what you should take away and if you need to add more. This can be the problem with the add and remove exercise, so always base it on performance and don't be afraid to add and take away. The next stage is going to be deloads. This becomes more important when people, especially when they're doing strength training, but deloads can be a great way of allowing the body to recover, recompensate and grow. And the analogy I'll think of is coffee. So if you start drinking coffee, kind of like when you're working out, you'll start getting a buzz, you'll start having a stimulus, you'll have a reaction to it. Your body will start getting used to it. Eventually, to still get that initial buzz or to feel more alert, that initial amount of coffee doesn't really do much for you anymore. So you have to start drinking more, either stronger coffees or more often. Similar with our training, we have to increase the stimulus before our body becomes sort of homeostasis with it, and it needs more to be able to trigger an adaptation to then respond. The problem is, if you keep training for a long period of time, you get to a point where your body can't progress anymore and it becomes desensitized to training. So similar to coffee, sometimes you keep drinking it, you're drinking a lot of coffee and it doesn't really have much of an effect for you. So what you end up doing, and what people recommend, is come off coffee for a week or two. So then your body can resensitize to that caffeine. And then after a week or two, or even a month off, I'm not saying rest a month from your training, but the analogy is you come off it, and then when you have one coffee, suddenly it hits you again and you're back to where you were. This is where deloads are kind of similar to that idea, where you kind of come back off, it allows your body to recompensate, to grow, to recover fully, not just your muscles, but your CNS system, your connective tissue and your joints. And then when you go back to a training, it feels like it's a brand new response. The one mistake that people do when they do deloads, let's say you started off with bodyweight pull-ups and you've got yourself up to 15 kilo weighted pull-ups and you're not progressing anymore. So you do a deload. The thing that people tend to do is they come back and go straight back to 15 kilos. That's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to scale back, but make sure that you scale back, but it's still an improvement from what your original base level is. So if you were used to doing 15 kilo and you started at bodyweight, take your deload, come back and maybe start at 5 kilo weighted pull-ups. It's still more than where you were, and if you can make the same progression in a couple months, 3 months, 6 months of a 15 kilo increase, then you start at 5 and now you end up at 20. And 5 kilos doesn't sound like a lot, but if you were able to make that difference in 3 to 6 months consistently for a couple of years, it's not going to take long where you're pulling out 30, 40, 50 kilo weighted pull-ups, which is an extremely impressive feat of strength. It might sound small, but it really adds up. So adding in deloads can be really important, but just make sure that you use them well. So as you can see, a lot of information that's covered in here. There's a lot going on. That's why I recommend writing it down or maybe rewatching the video, but hopefully you'll come away with some good basic information, at least especially when it comes to progression, and you've come away with a template workout. If you have a question, please don't hesitate to comment down below. I doubt you're the only one that has that same question. And if there's something particular that you've gone over where you need more information on, or you feel like maybe I've missed something and you want some clarification, please comment down below and I'll try and answer it in detail for you so you can come away with having more comprehension of the idea of programming. And if you have any things that you think that I missed or you feel will be really beneficial to add into this video, and please comment it down below, because like I said at the start, I want this video to be something that people can come to and they get all the information they possibly need. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumb up so other people get to see it. Make sure you subscribe for more videos like this. I do have a whiteboard video like this that talks about different types of hypertrophy, from sarcoplasmic to myofibrillar, so make sure you check that out here. But if you want more videos like this or on calisthenics as a whole, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.